Was good, y'all? Track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be breaking down a beat I made recently that was influenced by The Weeknd, but you can really apply most of these techniques to a lot of today's darker R&B sound. I created the full beat using one preset from Omnisphere. Every other instrument came from XO the Madness and XO the Stars. All the drums were done using our Legends Never Die drum kit and the Foundation percussion pack. You can find all that at StudioSounds.com right now for anyone who is interested. Don't forget to use the coupon in the description, save some money if you do decide to pick any of these kits up. Without further talking, let's go ahead and break this beat down. So for this particular track, I actually just started off with a preset called Dream of the Mystic Roads in Omnisphere. We're actually going to start putting together some Omnisphere banks for you guys here pretty soon. So I've just been playing with Omnisphere, seeing what's in it and just kind of getting ideas for different banks and stuff like that. So for this particular track, I started off with this sound, and it's just a cool little road sound that has some textures layered over the top of it. And I just played two simple chords with it right here. And then just some notes over the top, just kind of accent it. So by itself, this is what it sounds like. So a super simple progression, but I just felt like it had a nice kind of emotional tone to it, remind me of The Weeknd a little bit. So that's why I started off with. So the very next thing that I added to it was just a pad from Massive called the Bender pad, and this is from XO the Madness. And when you combine this, it just adds a little bit of a fullness to it and just another cool, interesting layer. All I did was just play the same chords on a higher octave. So here's what it sounds like. So I just basically like the fullness it adds. The little bend is kind of interesting, and it just helps thicken up the pad. So this is basically where everything started. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I stacked on top of this to continue building the track. So if we take a look at this track, it starts off with the intro, just playing that very first piece that we just worked on, pattern 1. And then it has like this little audio clip that comes on, just a little free sound effect that I found online, just of like an emotional woman kind of talking, and I felt like that kind of fit the theme of this. So here's what that sounds like when you add it over the top, and it just has a simple little automation, a volume automation, just so it turns up and turns down. And then right here is where it starts, kind of the beginning of the verse. You could really just use this as an intro, kind of be up to the artist and just have like a super short verse and then move to the hook. Or you could really start the verse from here. It really kind of depends on what they want to do. But either way, this is kind of where the next little section comes in. So the next little section that you hear in this particular track is pattern 1. And let me just go ahead and play that for you guys, and I'll break down how I created pattern 1. Alright, so what pattern 1 is basically just pattern 2, this little section, but it's just reversed and stretched out for double the time to kind of create those little swells. So basically this is what it is originally. So if you take a listen to it, it's just that time stretch to basically double the time to make it a lot slower. And then I just reversed it and chopped it up. So the first chord, obviously when you reverse it, it's gonna reverse the chord order as well. So all I did was chop it up and place the second chord to the first spot and the first chord to the second spot, just to make sure it matches. So that just creates a cool little dramatic layer, and I thought it sounded cool with this particular beat. And then I also reused pattern 2 as like kind of a more dramatic piece that builds into the verse and the hook. So it goes from this kind of more calm type piece to these little chord stabs or just kind of repeating chords that you hear on pattern 2, just to add kind of a little bit more of a dramatic effect to it. And then I also threw a strum on here, so just tool strum, and I made sure I had alternate directions, so just it'll change up a little bit, and that's what you see right here. That's why they're not perfectly on the grid. But yeah, that was the second thing I added to it. Then on pattern 4, it's just a very simple little kind of snare, just a little blip stone from our foundation percussion pack, and it just has a cool little reverb on it, and just EQ to cut off some of the bottom end. But I thought this would just be a cool way to use a more unique type snare and leave it more open until it actually gets to the hook. So when you add this little snare in here, this is what you have. Alright, so really simple, but just adds a nice little feel to it. Then we have pattern 6, which is just the kick. Again, just to add a little bit more of a dramatic effect. The first part doesn't have any drums in it, and then you just start bringing in the kick with that tom snare that I just showed you guys. So when you layer these together as it starts to build, is what you have. And that kick is just from the Legends Never Die drum kit if anybody's interested. And then on pattern 8, I have my bass line, which is super simple, just playing 4 notes, basically just the root notes of the chords. And that particular bass sound is called the BA Square Wave from EXO the Stars. Just a nice, very deep bass patch that just works really well in here. And I wanted to use this particular bass sound just because I felt like it had a more dramatic effect than maybe like an 808 or a more smooth bass line, which for Weeknd type stuff, I like to use stuff that's a little bit more dramatic. It just kind of fits his sound. He uses a lot of spooky stuff and stuff that just kind of isn't your typical R&B type sounds. So that's why I went with this particular bass sound. So like I said, when you add all that together, is what you have. And actually, I'll just play it from the very top for you guys.
I love you.
So for this little second section of the verse, I have a little vocal sample that comes in here just to break it up and add a little change up. And that's going to be on pattern 14. So let me show that to you guys real quick. The actual sample is going to be from our Phone Home drum kit. And all I did was just edit and then just detect pitch regions to figure out what the pitch is. And you can come in here, right click over B to make sure it's mapped to your keys correctly. So now you can actually play this little vocal sample like you would any other keyboard or VST. So once I had that, I added this little pattern in here initially. And let me just turn off the gross beat so you guys can hear it just dry. So I thought that sounded good, but I figured if somebody's trying to sing over that, I want it just to be slightly more open. So one way to kind of take something like this that's slightly more full and just break it up a little bit is just to use a little gate type effect. So what I used was just this little slow down gate, just because when I use this one, it's actually going to play different parts over different notes. So it just gives you a little bit of a change up as well as an interesting effect for the vocals. So here's what it sounds like with the growth speed on. And then from there, it's going to break into the first section of the hook. So let's go ahead and jump in the next section. I'll show you guys what actually goes into the hook. So if you take a look at it, the first thing that comes in is pattern 3. So pattern 3 is just another little pad called Isolationism. And this is from EXO the Madness. And just playing 2 notes to add a kind of a little bit more of a dramatic effect to it. This pad isn't quite as smooth as the other one. So it does have a little bit of a drama to it. But when we add it to the other instruments, this is what we have. So I'm not sure if you guys picked that up. It's very kind of faint and in the background, but it's just a slight little note that adds a little bit more of a dramatic effect and fullness to that hook section that I liked. So the next thing that I did was I just kind of continued layering. So I added another pad section just to kind of make the hook bigger. And this is Soma, and this is from EXO the Stars right here. And this is again just the same 2 chords that I played in the beginning. So just adds a little bit of movement, has a nice little dramatic touch, fits that Weeknd type sound. So I thought that sounded good. So I just continue layering from there. We just kind of keep continuing going down. And I'll break down the drums in a second. I just want to get through the instruments real quick. Pattern 8 is the bass line that I talked about. Pattern 9 is this little lead that I added over the top. This is just the chopped verb 2 from EXO the Stars. And by itself, here's what it sounds like. So when you combine all that, this is what you have. And that pretty much is going to cover most of the instrumentation for this track. So let's go ahead and jump to the next section and I'll start breaking down the drum patterns. So for the Weeknd's music, he kind of takes a little bit of different pieces from a lot of different genres. But for his drums, it's usually kind of either trap influenced drums or more pop style drums. So for this particular track, I went with more trap style drums. But in upcoming tutorials, I'll show you guys more of the pop stuff as well. So for this particular track, I started off on pattern 10 with this little hi-hat. And here's what that sounds like. Just started adding a nice little bounce to it. Then I added this little snare to it, which is really simple again. So I thought that was pretty cool, but I wanted the hook just to sound a little bit bigger. So I added this super reverbed out clap to it as well. And it also has a slight delay on it, but this particular delay, it actually has an automation effect to it. So if you take a look at it, the delay only plays the second time this clap hits. So here's what it sounds like. Alright, so really simple, nothing really too difficult there. And then I just add this little second hi-hat as kind of like a little accent piece. So again, a really simple little piece, but if you listen to it, you can just kind of hear the little difference it makes. And then the last thing that I added to this other than reverse crash was just this little percussion loop from our foundation pack that I went and time stretched to the track, and I turned it all the way down. And then I threw an EQ on here that was just very, very specific, just so I had just a certain little tiny piece of it. And I also chopped it up just to kind of fit the little timing that I wanted basically. But when you add it to the track, that's what you have. And if you actually take a look at the chopping, all I did was just get rid of this little part over here just because I wanted it to be a little bit more open. I didn't want that little kind of roll in there, so I just chopped that little piece out. And then from there it drops back into the verse. So the very last thing I added to this was just as a little transition piece. I just reversed a crash. So this is initially how it is. You just want to go to normalize, reverse, set your timing. For me, it happens to be 2 beats. Make sure it's set to generic so it doesn't change pitch. So this is what you have initially. And then what I did was I added a delay to it. The delay just actually helps this little effect. If you guys take a look at it, I have a slow down gate on this, so this little delay that kind of gives it a tail end sound just kind of runs through this gate, which kind of sounds interesting to me. So this is what you have. And here's what it sounds like with the track. And that pretty much covers the track. From here it was basically just arranging. As you guys can see, it kind of follows the same pattern over here. And I just did like a cool little outro piece where I took certain stuff out. Let me just play that for you guys real quick, and then added the little vocal section in here, just kind of close it off. So that pretty much does it for this video. I'm going to go ahead and play the beat from the top one more time for anybody who wants to check it out. Make sure you use the discount code to pick up any of the sound banks or kits that I'm using at studiosounds.com. Thank you again for watching. I hope you guys learned something new. Until next time, studiosounds.com.